Okay, so we're back. Thank you very much, everyone, for attending this webinar today on the keys to a cost-efficient compliance strategy in Ontario. We're broadcasting live from Montreal. The presentation, just for the format, so that you have an idea of the format, for those of you that have other things to do this afternoon, the presentation will be about 20 minutes, 20 to 25 minutes, and then there'll be a 5 to 10 minute question and answer period at the end. The questions and answer will be the questions that we received through the Q&A button, an option that you have on your screen. We will answer those Q&As most likely live at the end of the presentation. However, if we do not answer those Q&As directly at the end of the presentation, either live or by writing an answer, we will send you that information and make sure you receive the answer during the course of the day following the webinar. Another thing is that the presentation will be made available to you. So the presentation we're about to show you, the webinar will be made available to you, and we'll be sending that along by most likely email at the end of the webinar or later on during the course of the day. The two people that will be part of the webinar today are myself, of course, Jean Paquin, the Executive VP of Carbon Consult Group, and David Beaudoin, our Senior Project Manager at Carbon Consult Group. The CCG is, just in a quick nutshell, just for your information, CCG is a specialist in carbon management. We consult on carbon management, and we work mainly in Quebec and Ontario, also the rest of Canada, and have access to quite a lot of information on the best practices and the legislation around the world of what's being done on carbon management so far to date. So why are we doing this webinar today? From our experience in Quebec and also being in touch with the petroleum and gas suppliers around Quebec and the rest of Canada, and those that are involved directly with the Ontario market, we understand that you are facing many important issues because of the new cap and trade compliance, and there doesn't seem to be a lot of support that comes from the government. The government has put in place quite a lot of information. That information is sparse, is available, but it takes a little bit of getting used to get to the information, to consolidate the information, and to understand what the big picture and the obligations are with respect to cap and trade compliance. Our goal, therefore, is today to give you a better understanding of the cap and trade regulation and its impacts on your business. There are strategies to be put ahead for your business. There are ways to go around these obligations, and we want to help you understand how you can go about doing that. So, without further ado, we'll go directly to the presentation. You have the presentation live on your screen. Let me just get to the next slide here. Okay, hold on a second. Bear with me. So the two hosts you have today is myself and David, who's going to be reading some of the presentation from a technical perspective. Of course, David has quite a lot of understanding from the technical perspective and the cap and trade compliance, having dealt with many companies here in Quebec who, by the way, has the same regulation as the one that's actually being put forward in Ontario. So they're very similar, and David will tell you all about these detail later on. So our objective, of course, at the end of the webinar for you is to know and understand what cap and trade regulation is and how it affects you. It's important to get a feel of what is the extent of the regulation and also what you can do to manage it efficiently. so as to take the right decision from a business perspective. It is also important to understand the importance of the plan, to plan ahead. So the understanding of that planning ahead is going to be one of our objectives today, and also have a cap and trade compliance strategy put together. So it's not only responding to the obligations and the regulations, as you will see, it's also putting forward the right strategy to mitigate or to control the risks associated and the costs associated with such compliance. And the last objective, of course, understanding how you can minimize those costs and reduce the risks associated with it. Cap and trade highlights. Cap and trade regulation, as you know, some of you must know, is a mechanism that was put in place that puts a price on emissions. So again, in a nutshell, as opposed to a tax, where, for instance, you have a tax in British Columbia and likely to have a tax in Alberta as well, the cap and trade program or regulation is different because it is based on auctions, and it also based, of course, on the law of offer and demand. So the more demand and less offer, the higher the price. The less demand, the more offer on the market, the lower the price. There is a floor price, and we'll get to this a little bit later. So it's likely not to go to a low level, but likely to just increase. Plus, on top of this, you have obligations, and there's a 5% annual increase of the price, of the floor price, on top of CPI. So essentially, you are facing the reality of a market that has likely to have increase in price as we go along towards your meeting your obligation. It is used in Quebec and California since 2013. It will likely be available, actually it will not likely, it will be on the market in 2017 in Ontario. It raises government revenues, of course, to allow for a green program. So cap and trade is a proven market mechanism that was in place and is very efficient to manage carbon emissions. Now the regulation summary, I will let David start talking about these in details. David, please.
Yeah, thank you very much, Jean, for your introduction. So without further ado, I guess what's important to understand for you as petroleum product suppliers, either gasoline, diesel, propane, whatever, as suppliers and importers of these kind of fuels, there are two regulations that you have to deal with, well, actually starting today or starting earlier this year. The first one is the quantification, reporting, and verification of greenhouse gas emissions. And the second one is the actual cap and trade program regulation. Okay, and the two are really, they're interconnected, and they both have a set of obligations and requirements that you have to comply to. And really they work together. So it's important for you to understand the obligations that the two bring onto your organization. So the first one essentially says that for any importer, really we're dealing here with importation of fuel into Ontario. Okay, so virtually any importer, or actually those that import more than 200 liters of fuel, must quantify their emissions of the previous years. They have to report their GHG emissions by June 1st. They have to have this report verified. So that's one of the regulations. The other one really is the cap and trade program. That's the one that brings financial risk into your organization. The first obligation with regard to that regulation of the cap and trade is to register as a mandatory participant by November 30th of this year. Second obligation will be to have an emitter account open in the KITS platform. The KITS really being the electronic platform where transactions and acquisition of allowances will occur. But really the main obligation and the one that you have to keep in mind is the one that that tells you to cover the emissions, the greenhouse gas emissions with carbon allowances. Covering the emissions really means that you have to acquire GHG allowances and give them back to the government at the end of a compliance period. We will deal a little later on what is a compliance period, how long it is, and really at what point you have that obligation. So for as Jean mentioned already, what's also very important to understand is that this cap and trade regulation, it is not a tax, as opposed to a tax where you would have a specified rate that you would apply on each sale, on each liter of fuel that you will be selling, and that rate would be the exact same for everybody on the market. So as opposed to such a tax, the cap and trade will produce a price on carbon that will vary over time, and that will vary also from one emitter or one participant to the other, depending on the market and on your own strategy to comply to that regulation. So that's very important to keep in mind. The emissions from petroleum products supply are attributed to the importer. So you're the one with the obligations to get the allowances and to cover, as I mentioned earlier, these emissions with allowances. It's not your customer, it's not anyone down the supply chain. It's really the importer of that fuel that has that obligation. And that obligation, again, is due at the end of a compliance period. And the first one, the first compliance period really ends at the end of 2020. That being said, okay, 2020 is might seem a little far away in time. Really, and that's also what we've noticed in Quebec and California. Too many suppliers, too many companies that have to deal with those regulations sees that as a sufficient buffer for them to understand better the regulation and to act at a later stage. But that's really a mistake that most of them would admit they have done, and they would rather recommend to act earlier and get those allowances much earlier in time. When we speak of allowances, you need to understand what allowance is used to cover 1 ton of CO2. So we have here a quick calculation that we performed just to give you an idea of the type of obligation that you might have. So 1 million liter of gasoline really represent 2.3 thousand tons of carbon dioxide, of CO2. So to cover those tons of CO2, we need the exact same number of allowances, and at current market price, which we observe to be close to 18 Canadian dollars today, that represents more or less $41,000 to cover the emissions due to 1 million liter of gasoline. Again, what's important to understand is that price is more or less, okay, it's not accurate, it's not precise, and it's not going to be the same for all suppliers of fuel. It will vary for many reasons, as we will see. So again, if you have imported fuels in 2016, then you have to comply to both of the regulations that we just looked at, the reporting obligations and at least the registration to the cap and trade program. And what you will be performing or operating in the future will tell you what's the obligation with regard to acquiring GHG allowances and covering your emissions. So here we are looking at the different options for you to comply to that regulation. As I mentioned, you need to acquire GHG allowances, but there are different types of allowances that are offered on the market, and it's important to you to understand these types of allowances and also the means of acquiring those allowances, because really there are various options, and the opportunities for you to reduce the cost of compliance with cap and trade will occur from really knowing the ways to acquire those allowances, and also having a mix of different types of allowances within your portfolio. So you have the government allowances. These are the typical allowances that are generated by the government, and that will be put on the market and sold at usually at government auction or through direct government sale. So that's one type. One other important type for you to know is the offsets credits that are generated by project on the market. We won't go into too much detail of that, but it's important to keep in mind that you can also use offset credits to cover your emissions and to meet your obligation. And that these offsets are not sold by the government, they are sold by other participants on the market, and they are likely to be traded at a lower price than the actual allowances are. Again, we won't go into too much detail of why they're going to be traded at a lower price, but past experience has demonstrated it, and it is likely to continue at a lower price also. The third type of allowances is the early reduction credits. Again, that's a different type to keep in mind. We won't go into too much detail here, but it's a different kind of allowances that also might be traded at a different price. When we look at the means of acquisition of those allowances, well, the main that you have to keep in mind that people usually use is the government auction. That's really the main channel for you to acquire those allowances. There are also the direct government sale, where you will enter into mutual agreement with the government to acquire the allowances at a certain price. And the other one that is very important also, and that will keep growing in importance, is the trading with other participants on the market. So really, there are various ways to cover your emissions, to comply with the regulation, and these are important to keep in mind. Here, we just want to show you a basic trend of the price of carbon that we observed on the markets over the past years in California and Quebec. And really, this is mainly to demonstrate the upward trend of that of this carbon price over time, and this is likely to keep on rising. So that's why it's really important to not to wait to acquire allowances and to comply to the regulation, and act now if possible, or at least as early as possible. Let's bring you to the slides on risk and opportunities. In terms of legal risk, it's important to keep in mind that there are various deadlines that is occurring from that regulation. There are complex tasks also to be performed for those who went through their registration process already. Well, you can certainly you certainly realized how complex this task was, and it's likely, it's going to be the same for example, to prepare for auctions. It's not a very straightforward process. There are various things to be considered and mandatory information to provide to the government. Same thing for the transaction to be performed on kits on the platform, on the transaction platform. And if for some reason you don't comply to those obligations, well, there are several and important penalties that may apply. So be aware of those risks and make sure you plan ahead. Now, what's also very important for you are the financial risks, because as we mentioned, this is not a tax. It's difficult to forecast what the actual price is going to be for carbon allowances, and again, it will vary over time, and it will differ from one participant to the other. These risks on a financial perspective comes from that fluctuation of the price of carbon allowances. And for petroleum product suppliers like you, where you can pass this cost on to your customers, well, that's right, but there's a significant risk that arises when you realize that the actual purchase of the fuel by your customer, between that point in time and the time that you will purchase allowances, there's a significant time gap between the two that may go from only a few weeks to really several years. Again, the compliance period ends at the end of 2020. So for fuel that you'll be selling on January 1st of 2017, you have until 2020 to get allowances for that. Usually, the shorter that period, or the more proactive you are, the closer the price you're charging your customer will be to the actual price of allowances that you will be acquiring. But again, to understand that risk, to assess that risk, and to have an actual strategy to make sure that the price that you pass on to your customer is sufficient to cover your cost of acquiring carbon allowances, is sufficient. So with all this in mind, we want to give you the main keys that we put in place with our clients, and that we that through our experience in Quebec and California have demonstrated to be effective to get an understanding and make sure that you comply on time with all the obligations that you have, and that you don't that you're able to perceive the opportunities when they come and actually reduce the cost of compliance. So these keys to a cost-effective compliance strategy really, first of all, look at all possible options for you to comply. Okay, we've looked at the different types of allowances that are available in the market. We've looked at the different means for you to acquire them. It's important to have these tools, have these ways in mind, and be aware of how you can actually comply to that regulation, rather than focusing on only one type of allowance and only one type of acquiring them. Second thing is really simply draw a timeline with the key dates and deadlines. Okay, that's something that one person within your organization has to have on his her dashboard. Have that timeline in front of you. Make sure you remember those deadlines, and that you're on time able to do the actions that are required to comply. The third aspect would be, or suggestion would be, to get in touch with market participants. Okay, again, you can acquire, if you want, you can acquire all your allowances from the government, but really opportunities arise when you're in touch with those other market participants, and that you share experiences with them, and that you make sure that you're in the loop when it comes to a point that they want to enter into a transaction as a buyer or as a seller, and the price of that transaction may be lower than what we observe on the actual market trend or market price. So really, it's important to be in touch with these kind of market participants. Also, if possible for you, network with offset credits proponents. Again, offset credits are likely to be traded at a lower price than regular allowances. So the more offset project proponents you have in your network, the better the opportunities for you to get access to these low-cost allowances. Also, try to monitor all the market signals. Okay, there are informations out there that you can use to identify if we're on upward or downward trends for the carbon price. There are different signals that are sent by different person, by different institution, by different organizations. So if you're aware of those signals, well, you can adapt your strategy accordingly. And finally, and again, that's the key point of this whole webinar, and that's what we want you to go home with, is to plan ahead. Do not wait. Know what you will need in terms of how many carbon allowances you will need this year, next month, next year, and if possible, even far further in the future. Really, that's how best performing organizations on the carbon market have been able to lower their cost, is to plan ahead and know what their needs are. And also look at market trends. Is it going upward? Is it going downward? Understand the market dynamic, what brings the cost of carbon up and what can bring it down. So if you're aware of that, then you will be able to tackle opportunities that arise from a smart planning and strategy that you may have.
Thank you very much, David, for this. Of course, this is quick. This is a lot of information, trying to condense information in a short period of time. Hopefully you understand the importance of the compliance by now, and see how I guess the best practice in the market can help providing or putting together or structuring the right strategy for your business. Of course, it's a matter of planning ahead to save costs and to save money, really, because a lot of the companies we talk to come on in the market and say, well, we don't really have that obligation to declare until 2020, therefore we'll just take a break and we'll wait until then. Well, that's maybe one way to go. The problem with this is you're taking quite a lot of risk. You're putting layers and layers of risk, because we don't know what the market will be, and it will likely be up. So those costs ultimately that will have to be covered will be incurred by the company and will be higher than if the company would have planned ahead of time. Usually at the end of the year or period, people have to comply, and the price, obviously, the speculation go up and the need go up, so the demand is higher than it would be otherwise, and the price on the market might be higher. And that is where the difference with a tax comes in. So the benefit, I mean, that doesn't really have to go through all the details, but the benefit of working with us, exactly that. We have a lot of experience in this, and we can help you put it together from a strategy perspective and understand what you really need for your business and how to bring your compliance costs down. So question and answer that we have, we've received quite a lot. It's just amazing, but some of them are quite similar. So what I'll do, instead of writing them down, I'll just read them out to you. One of the question that keeps on coming out is, obviously with respect to the what I've done in the past and what are my obligations, etc. So one is, I have imported fuel in 2016, but I don't know what I will do in 2017. Sorry, we don't know if we're still on. Sorry, guys, we've had a little glitch here. And let me just come back with our screen, for instance. Hold on a second. I should be back online. Yes, here we go. Let's see. Yes, I think we have a screen. Unbelievable. Okay, hold on a second. All right, sorry guys. Thank you for staying on. We're really, really sorry about that. We've had a connection glitch. Hopefully there's not too much of an issue on your end. We'll just get back to the screen. So just while they're putting back the screen, I was answering the obligation to actually import, or the obligation they have for those who don't know what to do in 2017. Yes, they do have quantification and reporting of GHG emission obligation as well. Sorry, I don't know if we're, I think we're on. Yes, I think we're on right now. Yes, okay, here we go. So another question that comes on is, there is plenty, excuse me, I'm only a propane importer. Am I covered by the regulation? Well, as a propane importer, sorry, yes, you are. And all imported fuel, as a matter of fact, heating, oil, gas, and propane are petroleum fuel suppliers, and they are covered by the regulation. Another question is, there is plenty of time before the compliance period ends in 2020, which is what I was talking about before. Why should I do something now? Again, acting now reduces your exposure to future risk of carbon credits. And indeed, there will be a 5% increase annually on top of the CPI. So, and since we anticipate demand to increase more than the actual offer, the final price of those credits on the market are likely to be higher than they are today. And that obviously calls for a plan and a strategy, as we mentioned before. Another question, I have quite a few, is just, whoa, it's just popping. So I'm going to answer 3 next questions, and then we'll leave it because we're already past our time. And I will send the rest of the answers directly to your attention, to those of you who have asked those questions. The government didn't advise us properly ahead of time of the registration deadline. Is it too late now? Will we have penalties? Well, the deadline is November 30th, like you know, so that's just 7 days away. And since the registration process takes a few weeks, of course, that leaves no time, and we're past, you know, the actual possibility of being registered on time. But in any case, and following our numerous conversations with the ministry, we understand, we're under the real impression, because this has happened in Quebec as well in the past, we're under the impression there will be no penalty, and the government will be lenient on that and will demonstrate, as long as the actual registrant is actually demonstrating that they have officially started the process ahead of time. So, of course, that doesn't mean you don't need to do it, because otherwise, well, I've passed the deadline. It means you have to do it. But we believe strongly, from having seen that in Quebec and from having talked in the ministry, that they will consider it. They will consider it official, and you might not have penalties at all. We can't guarantee that, of course, but that's our feeling. Another question is, can I know how much it will cost me to comply to the regulation. So one of the way actually to assess is a little bit complex, but we can roughly assess that cost. But it will very much depend on a lot on how the plan is to comply, as well as explained like the webinar. The earlier you plan, the better it is for you. So again, a cost is a lower cost probability, let's call it this way, if you plan ahead. If you wait at the last time, we can almost guarantee it's going to cost you more than it would otherwise if you would have planned ahead. So one of the final question here that was sent to us, is this only me or who has that problem? Well, I guess we've kind of answered that. No, all fuel importers have that obligation. The numerous businesses that we're working with right now are in the same situation as yours, and we are dealing with numerous requests and have special staff dedicated only for that registration as we speak. So it's not something you will be the only one that hasn't registered. No, there's quite a few people, and like I said, the ministry is quite aware of that right now. So it's like very less likely that there'll be penalty imposed on those who don't register on time. So we want to thank you very much for having gone through this presentation with us, this webinar. We also want to thank you for going through the glitches we've had with the system. Apologize for that. We'll keep in touch. We will send you again the presentation in a PowerPoint or PDF format. You will be able to refer to it, and you can communicate with us if you have any further question. I see there's other questions. Unfortunately, I don't know if we have maybe a last time here, another one that just came in. What is the exemption for First Nation in Northern Ontario? We have to look into this, but we understand there are some exemptions, but we'll be able to see more in detail today and send you the information by email, likely this afternoon. So thank you very much for your time and patience, and we wish you the best with this compliance, and please keep in touch with us if you need some help to comply in Ontario. Thank you, and have a wonderful day.